Hello and welcome to So VT Book Talk. I'm your host, Karen Simpson McVicker, and I am thrilled today to be joined by Jess Hunsaker, who is the events coordinator at Northshire Bookstore. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Karen.
How are ya?
Good. It's so good to be back.
I know, and now we've got this beautiful spring, almost summer weather outside.
Oh my gosh.
So great.
Yes.
And I'm super excited about our guest today. So we are being joined by G.R. Hastings, who is a maritime archaeologist and specializes in colonial America and the golden age of piracy. He earned his Master's of Science in Maritime Archaeology and Conservation at Texas A&M University and his Bachelor of Arts in Archaeology and Performing and Media Arts from Cornell University, writing his senior thesis about the lost colony of Roanoke. And he's written numerous short stories and plays, some of which have seen the stage. And for his one-act play In the Mind in 2019, he actually wrote, directed, and did the stage lighting for the production. And The Cursed 500 was selected for Cornell's 10-Minute Play Fest in 2019. And he had a short play, The Undersiders Tale, and it won first place in the Jean E. Miller Young Playwrights Competition at the Dorset Theater Festival back in 2015. So GR was also a regular contributor to the Cornell Daily Sun, known as the humorous horror film critic. And on the Isle of Shoals, he drew in crowds with his Tales of Vayman, which he might have brought Vayman with him today. And he's developed multiple social media series, including Trip Tips and Island Walker. And he's here today to discuss his debut novel, The Undersiders, which is young adult historical fiction set in 1962. So Garrett, welcome to the show.
I'm good to be here.
We are so excited to have you here. Now, I heard when we were chatting in the pre-show that the idea for The Undersiders for your novel actually started as a high school project. So let's start there.
Yeah, so back when I was in high school, I was really interested in the story of the Lost Colony. I'd actually heard about it back in middle school even, but I was really invested in this whole story of the people coming over, people already being there, how they interact and that kind of thing. And in this case of this story, I first started writing it all the way back in 10th grade. So it was a little bit ago. And when I was doing that, it was a screenplay.
Okay.
So I learned all about screenplay format. I used something called Final Draft, which people may or may not be familiar with. And doing, draft after draft. And by the time I was ready in senior year, I thought I had done all the research I could. Little did I know that there is never enough research you can possibly do.
Right.
So it was a lot of just getting people together. When I was there, I believe is still happening. There is something called an enrichment class or an E-class because I went to Long Trail School over in Dorset.
Mhm.
And what I would do is I would bring a bunch of people together. We go through the scripts. We do even some filming. And actually, I'm going to touch base on that in just a second. So I brought all these people together to act it out and created this screenplay. We did a stage reading in May of 2015, so a little bit ago now, but it's still obviously very fresh in my mind. But I did this, a lot of just research on my own, and, well, I would actually even be using cameras from GNAT. So GNAT-TV is my connection even here.
That's great.
So it was really cool actually to come back here because I got the chance to borrow these cameras for not only the enrichment class itself, for filming some of the scenes, such as one in an inn, and also for filming the stage reading itself. I was
That's
a bit of a
wonderful.
novice at the time for filming,
Oh.
so but it still came out pretty well, I think.
That is so fantastic. Well, we love hearing stories about local creative people and being able to use all the wonderful resources that we have here. So that's a great start.
Yeah.
And now it's a novel.
Yes.
So what was the process getting it from a high school project to a published novel?
So I actually did just realize that I forgot to mention the plot here. So the plot.
Tell us about it.
So I keep mentioning, Roanoke Island. Well, the plot is story takes place in 1962 about a family. They're known as the Timmers. They go all the way from Idaho, and they go move over to Roanoke Island, knowing little of the mystery lurking there. And they fall, at least some of them, fall instantly in love with the Dare Lighthouse Inn on the island, and which is a invented inn. So I got the shirt Dare Lighthouse Inn, and also the little signage there.
But you made it up.
But I made it up, so it exists right here.
Yeah.
So they move out there. And it focuses on the daughter, Sarah, and her brother, and the kids who stay at the inn, because it's a Dare Lighthouse Inn, and how they help break free an ancient curse. So the lost colonists from an ancient curse on the islands. And they have to do so before the night of the full moon.
Okay.
So, and we get characters with, the historical figures the historical characters, if you will, in 1962, but also the historical figures of the ghosts who come into the story. Such as John White, if you know the story. If you don't, he was a pretty prominent governor of the Lost Colony itself. He was also the painter of the original colony, because there was a colony there a year beforehand. But that is a long story, and that's the reason I have a book. But speaking of which, so the process of getting it, I was trying to figure out how to turn the screenplay into a novel format. I was actually told for a while that I should be turning it into a novel. It's like, oh, there's a lot here, and I kept cutting things out to make it a screenplay because it was very long. I kept cutting things out until it was at least around 2 hours. And it was a joy writing it again, because then I could put those scenes back in and add even more scenes.
Yeah. And then when you get your movie contract, they'll take them all back out again.
Exactly. But so the big thing for me was I really wanted to figure out how to start it. I was trying to figure it because I had this prologue, and the whole thing with the prologue is that an adult version of the main character, Sarah, is reading over a narration of the history of what happened at Roanoke Island. So I'm like, how am I going to take this just visual and audio and turn it into just a visual medium, right? And I remember I was on a bus, I was driving home. I don't know. I just don't be afraid. Just was like, all right, that sounds like a good starting place. And the rest just kind of came out from there. And I'm like, all right, I think I finally know how to start this book.
Oh, that's great.
And it took me a while.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. So kind of how long did that process take, moving it from the screenplay to, and we won't say all the way to a published novel, but moving it from the screenplay to a finished manuscript, say.
To finish draft. It only took me a couple months.
Wow.
It was when COVID started. So I started because I was in grad school, because my grad school years was like a bunch of, grad school and then COVID and then finishing it off.
Okay.
And so I started just before COVID started, and then the shutdown happened. That I had a bunch more time to just write, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it took me a couple months because I wanted to, I had the screenplay on one side and then the narrative on the other, and I was trying to figure out where exactly, where I want to add, what I want to put back. For example, there's a French character, Louis, who was pretty much cut out mostly from the screenplay, and I'm like, oh, I'm putting him back. I get to put him back now. So that was pretty exciting. But it was a lot of just trying to see where I can even add like some more internal stuff that I wasn't able to add before. So that was a lot of that process.
Yeah, I think that's the big difference going from screenplay to novel and back and forth, is the whole internal monologue piece, and sort of that what they, that deep POV is what they're looking for in the novel, and that really change. It's a whole different situation when you're writing a screenplay.
Yeah.
Were you taking any classes in novel writing to help you make that transition?
So I was taking writing classes. There was one creative writing class I did take, however, it was mostly focused on poems. But I did do a fair amount of writing, and I knew some stuff to look for. Yeah. And part of the process was learning how to do that too. Was like writing it, going online, reading forums, that kind of stuff. Like, should I have it this way? Should I write my French accent, or say he has a French accent and write it out? And it's like, all right, it's easy to read this way. Perfect.
Yeah.
So some of that was that kind of stuff. And it was, it was just all a learning process. It was my first full novel. I had the story with the screenplay format, and so it was very interesting to dive into it in a different way.
And do you anticipate wanting to write more novels, or do you enjoy screenplay? I mean, it seems like you do a lot of different things. You've done stage plays, you've done screenplays, now you've written a novel.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, my stage plays have seen the stage. My novel now sees publishing. My screenplays, though, haven't seen much.
Okay.
Maybe one day, who knows? But I am working actually on other novels. I do like I do tend to write in a very diverse like range of genre. So for this one, it's historical fiction, young adult. I do have other ones in the work with that. I do actually have a follow-up screenplay that I'll eventually turn into a novel. But there are other elements, like mentioned earlier, I like having a little dabbling into horror a little bit because it's fun. And I'm doing one right now that's post-apocalyptic a little bit. So that kind of.
So in the time frame in this, we have it's a single time, which is 1962, but it's also a little bit like a dual timeline because you're going back to these ghosts.
Yes.
So what is the era of these ghosts that you were having to do historical research on? When were they alive?
For the most part, it was the 1580s.
Oh, okay.
So that was interesting because how I started off, I kind of misinterpreted the kind of era I needed to be in. So I started writing the characters in Old English. Little did I know I merely needed Middle English, or or like Elizabethan, more or less, which was really fun to write in. There's a couple of characters who speak in this Elizabethan English, and you compare it with someone from 1962, and the main character tries to speak back in Shakespeare, the Shakespearean speech, and she just can't. And it's funny how she fails.
Oh,
but one of the people in the story, just like is an undersider, so doesn't doesn't really have a lot of friends, kind of fades to the background like a ghost, right? It's kind of the idea. But a lot of it, like the real ghosts parallel with the, metaphorical ghosts. And so this character, Michael, he reads a lot of Shakespeare. So he's able to easily communicate with these people.
Oh, this sounds so great.
Yeah.
So we see that in there. And also ghosts being able to watch people, like over a period of time so they can learn. Some of them can also just learn like more modern speak, if you will.
Right.
And I did do a lot of research into what things happened, like things that were around in 1962. Like for example, we didn't have flash mobs in 1962. We had there are a lot of themes with games and a lot of prevalence with the Twilight Zone, which was around then. And even with that, we mentioned before that I have a thesis for an undergrad that was all about Roanoke Island. To what extent can we know what happened to the lost colonists of Roanoke Island? And I did a lot of deep delving. I got a chance to go to England to see the original works of John White, those paintings, which are in the British Museum. They're on display. You got a request for them personally, which is awesome.
Very cool.
So that was really cool. I got there's the Tower of London, Sir Walter Raleigh. He was a very interesting character who helped finance Roanoke Island, also went looking for gold in Venezuela. And but being able to go that and then go down to the Outer Banks for even more research, because I had been there before. But this was a chance to really give me some time to look at all the museums and all that kind of stuff, and things I would incorporate to this and mention, like there's archaeology going on in the 60s and that kind of thing, like mentioning, is this referring to this? And of course, I was able to even go check out the Dare Stones. The Dare Stones, I don't know if you know about them, are very interesting and historical on their own, but they are a very interesting conspiracy theory. There are a lot of stones that were brought in. Essentially, there was one stone that was brought in that looked legitimate, that said, the lost colonists went here. So there's a lot to the story. They went 50 miles into the Maine, or 50 miles inward, supposedly, by what they left behind, because they didn't leave a cross to say that they were in trouble. And so, the stones were found in the 1930s, up until the 1940s, but the first one, they're like, all right, this is referencing more stones. However, if someone finds more stones, bring them forward. We'll pay you for it. Well, then the stones start coming in. And so I got to see the original stone, which they say has not been disputed, although the year is a little messed up. The rest of the stones I also requested to see, and they are just vastly different.
Wow.
And they're really interesting. But they're from the 1930s and 40s, so they're historical.
So that's the
That is
archaeology
amazing.
piece of the research too, is that they're
Yes.
actual artifacts
Yeah.
from this lost colony, or are there?
more or less. There are artifacts from the first colony. So
Yeah.
so Ralph Lane, he helped this colony kind of get started. It was more building a fort. He brought over about 100 or I think more than 100 people over, and this was in the 1585, 1586, because 1587 was a lost colony. Well, they went over and they caused problems for themselves a little bit. There was a lot of distrust, as there was in the colonies back in the day, and they ended up splitting up, going to different places because of a big drought. It was the worst drought in 800 years at that time, and they ended up spreading out, and then they had really bad relations with the chief, Pemmisopan. And there's a really good book called The Head in Edward Nugent's Hands. I don't have a copy of that with me, which talks all about that first colony. And, well, in the end, the English did cut off the head of the chief.
Oh, my gosh.
And then Francis Drake comes over and says, "Hey, you guys okay?" And they say, "Get us out of here." And that was the backdrop to the Lost Colony.
Okay.
So what do you think happened?
Well, and that's great that you brought up some of these other books, because I know you're still reading and doing some research on some other things here. And one of the segments we like to do on SoVT Book Talk is Jess and I talk about our last read, what we're reading now, and what we're hoping to read next. And we'd love it if you wanted to play along and share with us what you're reading, because I see you brought some books. So
yeah, of course.
give us your last now next.
So the last one, I read this one called Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean. Wow. So it's very interesting. However, you know what it is not about? Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean. It is a very interesting read. It's about the Spanish Inquisition, because no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. And if anyone's a Monty Python fan, so this one actually is about basically the start of the Inquisition and Jews going to the New Worlds, or then it was called, and basically just like starting out there, trying to escape the Inquisition, going down to the Mediterranean. It brings up one Jewish pirate, Samuel Planche, but he's in the Mediterranean. But it does refer to other Jewish pirates, but they're actually privateers, because pirates have allegiance to themselves. Privateers have an allegiance to a country, and it's usually privateers are during wartime, pirates are during peacetime. It's usually how it goes. Okay. And buccaneers are similar, except they're given a letter of marque to do what they want.
Okay.
So differences between pirates and privateers. I work aboard a ship right now. People see our ship and they said, "Oh, pirates." I'm like, no, not exactly.
No, not quite.
So that is, it is very interestingly written. There's a lot of characters to refer to. It does bounce around a little bit, but it also likes to talk specifically about supposedly Columbus's lost gold mine, which is interesting.
All right. What are you reading now?
So what I'm reading now is a book that if you know any ship people, you bring up this book, they probably read it. It's called Master and Commander. It's the Jack Aubrey series. I believe most people, if you've been on a ship or whatever, or even with maritime archaeology, have read this book. So I'm finally getting into it.
Great.
So it's really interesting. One particular thing I like to note that I'm starting off here is that the descriptions are very interesting and very detailed, but all pertain to the theme. One example I like was talking about how this guy was sweaty, and this bosun was very sweaty, and he's very tightly in his uniform, saying he got shaped as if from an adze, which is something they would use in shipbuilding.
Yeah.
So, and my next one is going to be the next book in the series, which is Post Captain. I have most of the books in the series, so it'll be good to get into them because
very, very fun. All right. So I'm going to go and then make sure that I say Simon's name right when I get Simon. Yeah. Okay. So the last book that I want to talk about that I read is called Dear Edna Sloan, and it is by Amy Shern. And I had the pleasure of hearing Amy speak about this book when I was at the LA Times Festival of Books last month. And it is fabulous. It's just brilliant. It is an epistolary. So it is told all through texts and emails and letters and pieces of novels and actually course syllabi. It's really brilliant, the format of it. So expect something different. It's a quick read, but it is taking a look at the literary world and how it has changed since the 80s. So Edna Sloan was a sort of the darling of the literary circles back in the 80s. She wrote an incredible debut novel, and then she literally disappeared. No one could find her. There was no follow-up novel. Like, no one knew where she was. And then you fast forward to today's time, and you have a young man who's sort of done everything right, got his MFA at Iowa, should be out there building a literary life, and he's working at sort of a thinly veiled version of, like BuzzFeed writing clickbait, and decides how he's going to make his mark is he's going to find Edna Sloan. So I read it on a single plane flight. It was just a delight. I thought it was fabulous. So I highly recommend Dear Edna Sloan. And then next up for me, my now is Sipsworth by Simon Van by Bowie. Bowie, like
kind of like buoy,
like a buoy, but not quite. Simon Van Bowie. And this, I got to hear Simon speak because he came to Booktopia at the North Shore Booktopia, and he was one of the best authors I maybe have ever heard speak. He was incredible. But this is a story about a woman at the end of her life. She's lost her husband and her son sort of in a senseless accident, so she decides to return to her small town in England where she was born, sort of complete the circle, go home there. She's ready to die. And then a little mouse comes into her life, and it's a book about second chances, and it's just charming. So I'm really excited, and I did push this on my book group here locally, and so far everyone is loving it. So I'm really excited to finish this. And then next up on my TBR is The Still Point by Tammy Greenwood. I also got to hear Tammy speak out at the LA Times Festival of Books. She was in the same panel with Amy because they were talking about books that were about writing and about the literary life. So this book combines the story of a mother who is a writer, trying to complete her own work, but also who has a daughter who's a competitive ballerina. So it takes a look at that really almost like the cutthroat mothers of ballet life, and this mother who's a writer. But Tammy is just an incredibly prolific writer. I think this is her 16th novel. And while she lives out west, she spends summers in Vermont. So Jess and I are going to be having lunch later to talk about how maybe we could get Tammy on the show or doing something here in Vermont. So I'm really excited. And I love Tammy's writing. Everything I've ever read by her, I just love it. You just feel like you're there. She's just an incredible storyteller. So I'm really excited to dive into that.
Ooh,
Jess.
All right, I've got kind of an interesting little pile. I feel like I always say that, but I have such an opportunity because I'm exposed to so many different types of books, that I've been diving into like a lot of things that I never thought I would enjoy, and I've been very pleasantly surprised. This one, however, is something I knew I was going to really like, because anything that City Lights puts out, I get really excited about. This comes out May 21st, so I have like a little bit of an advanced copy, but it's called Cartoons. It's by Kit Schluter, and it's a collection of these short stories that Kit calls cartoons, and each story kind of has like a little illustration to go along with it, but it's just wild. Like, each of these is so abstract and uncanny. The way that I've heard it described is it's like if Bugs Bunny met Franz Kafka. It's just wild, and so like the imagination of this author really shines through, but at the same time it's so poignant and relevant. I think at the stage of life that I'm in, like growing into adulthood, there's a lot of stories that reflect on that in here. So I really connected with this little book, and it was a quick read as well, but if anyone is a fan of the absurd, I think that they would be really into that. Right now, actually just started Henry by Alan Bratton. And this is, so far, I mean, for anybody else who really enjoyed Saltburn, I think they would love this book because it's kind of out there. It's pretty crazy. It's just recently also come out. But it is kind of like a repackaging of Shakespeare's Henriade. But it takes place it's more contemporary. It takes place in 2014, and it's about kind of this like House of Lancaster, and about this main character Hal and the legacy that has kind of been put onto him through his father Henry. And Hal is a queer protagonist, and you just basically get to follow him as he kind of navigates through this life in this world that is just so very, I think, foreign to so many people. He's very much like in this upper echelon kind of environment, and he's encountering the same types of struggles that anybody would, with family and aging parents and whatnot, and love and loss. So I've really been enjoying this so far. And then next on my pile is another novel, Mother Doll by Katya Apenica. And this story is all about kind of generational, like not just trauma, but history and culture as it's passed down. This is described as a nesting doll of a novel, which I think is really funny. It's about 4 different generations of mothers and daughters, and kind of the way that the history of Russia has impacted each of them, and how that's compounded over the course of all of their lives until the most recent daughter, who lives in Los Angeles. She's pregnant. She has a baby of her own and a husband and her own family life, and is very much like living kind of this American lifestyle, and yet is still very much impacted by.
I love the cover.
Oh my gosh, I do
because
too.
you can tell immediately it's a Russian
Exactly.
nesting doll. I think that's amazing.
Yes. So this I've heard so many good things about.
Okay, that might go on my list. That sounds really
not wait to
interesting.
dive into it.
All right, well, thanks. And Garrett, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
And now we're so excited to have Paige Vignola with us from the Manchester Community Library to share what is happening at the library this coming month.
Yeah, it's busy. Summer's coming up, and so therefore we have a whole bunch of stuff related to our summer reading program. But we also always in the summertime do summer music series programs as well. So we've got summer music that's going to be happening on June 1st. Actually, Sam's Wood Fired Pizza is going to be there as well while we're listening to Mark and Clark. We've got more music that's going to be happening on June 15th. I've got music that's happening on June 29th. Anyway, we got a lot of concerts. All the concerts will have food from local vendors present. And I would love to be able to tell you about all of them, but I know we're a little pressed for time, so I'm going to keep it quick. On June 6th, though, we do have Tilly Walden coming in, and I'm very excited about that. If you are familiar with Tilly Walden's work, you should be kind of excited as well. Her topic is going to be comics and queerness in Vermont and beyond. I have to be honest, I did not know that there was a cartoonist laureate for Vermont until I did a little bit of background research on Tilly. Yes, very kind of cool, right?
Yeah,
like,
only in Vermont.
Go Vermont, right? All right, but so Tilly Walden is the Vermont Cartoonist Laureate and presents a look at the intersection of indie comics with queer identity through many graphic novels, from science fiction to memoir and historical telling. That this talk is going to be on June 6th. It's a Thursday, starting at 5:30, and going to be looking at how comics have been part of American culture, really, from the Peanuts on, right? I mean, can you get more basic than that, really? But then you take a look at works like Mouse and Persepolis, and how things have really kind of gotten a little bit more gravitas to them as well. And so that's Thursday, June 6th, from 5:30 to 7. The following Friday, we've got a really big deal going down at the library. We're doing a gallery opening from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock for the love of Vermont, right? So Lyman Norton's collection, right? But this is the opening of, it's a new collection to see. There are over 70 works that have not been seen in the area. And so they're previously not viewed, which is phenomenal. The exhibit's going to be up from June 14th to September 7th, and we're partnering with the Manchester Historical Society to do a number of different events in order to be able to kind of bring some of the interest and historical background and significance of the pieces to a little bit easier for people to understand. The first event of that series is going to be on Thursday, June 27th, and Sean Harrington is from the Historical Society is going to be talking to us that night. The gallery opening on the 14th, we're actually going to have like a Bites and a gallery tour, and Lyman is going to be talking to us about the significance of the works that he's been gathering as well. So very excited about that one. But also on June 15th is the kickoff of the summer reading program. So it's kind of it's a big deal, right? And this year we're doing an adult summer reading program as well. So we're going to have a lot of events going all through the summer encouraging adult summer reading. And not necessarily, well, anyway, we've got a bingo. I know you laugh because you're like, you knew where my brain went on that one. So we're going to have a bingo card. We're going to have summer reading raffle prizes. We're going to have all different kinds of events that are both family focused, children focused, but also summer reading events that are specifically targeting more of an adult audience. But our big kickoff on the 15th, we're going to have Troy Wonderly from his Big Top Adventures is going to be coming in. We're going to be getting people registered online for counting hours of reading. We're going to be handing out our bingo cards, and you can get a list of all the different summer reading events that are going to be taking place. That night, we also have one of our summer music series concerts taking place. I'm excited as well this summer for part of our summer reading program. We're partnering with Merck Forest. So Merck is going to be coming in and doing 3 different series of events that's going to be orienteering and map reading. It's going to be culminating on hiking up in the trails behind SVAC. But the first of those is going to be June 29th. Also, June 29th, we're partnering with the Weston Young Theater Company, right? And they're doing a presentation, an hour-long stage performance of Junie B. Jones. And so that's very much family-friendly, and it should be a hoot and a half, right? Just a good laugh, and I'm very excited to be able to do a collaborative effort with the Weston Theater Company. And this is their youth theater. And then again, we have another concert that Saturday night. So Sugar House Fire will be June 29th. And that one should be super fun as well. A good bit of blues and rock happening. So on Saturday, June 22nd, on Saturday, June 22nd, actually, you heard him here, right? You met Garrett here, but Garrett Hastings is going to be at the library. So he's going to be doing a discussion about his book that we were just discussing, and as well as a Q&A. The novel is obviously The Undersiders, and he's going to talk about why he wrote it and the research that went into the creation of it. And it's a piece of historical fiction, as you all know at this point. But you heard him here, and now you have the opportunity to come and meet him in person and talk to him in person.
And Jess, what's happening at Northshire Bookstore?
Yes, we got a lot of fun stuff happening at the store as well. I'm going to start actually by sharing a little bit about an event that we're doing in Saratoga Springs over in New York, but I would be really remiss not to mention it because we are just all so floored that it's happening. Doris Kearns Goodwin, one of America's most beloved historians, will be coming to Saratoga to discuss her new book, An Unfinished Love Story, with Joe Donahue, and that will be June 2nd at 3 p.m. It's this beautiful book that weaves together memoir and history and biography, and she's just an amazing speaker. She's so compelling. I had the opportunity to listen to her talk about this book in Cincinnati, and it was amazing. So I'm personally so excited. I just needed to share that. But then coming back to Manchester, Southern Vermont clinical psychologist Louis Propp will celebrate his retirement after decades of service to families in our region at the store with the release of his book, Notes from a Child Psychologist. And that will be on Sunday, June 9th at 1 p.m. It's every single case that he talks about, it's all a narrative that's been made anonymous and everything. But he really just documents some of the amazing experiences that he's had treating patients right here in our region throughout his career. So that'll be kind of an amazing send-off for him. 3 local authors will be in the store on Saturday, June 15th, autographing copies of their latest books. We're going to have Daniel Scamell and a book that he has written called Walnut Ridge, Matt Spencer's Storytime with Crazy Uncle Matt, Volume 2, Never Meet Your Heroes, and Patricia Lyko Connolly's Sacredness Surrounds Us in Every Season. So there's a little bit of something for everybody that will be there. That will be a fun afternoon. Those are always from 2 to 4 p.m. We're also going to be hosting 2 local poets for another kind of low-key local author event, and that will be Saturday, June 22nd in the afternoon. Gary Margulis will share his poetry collection, What It Means to Be Happy, and Steve Britton will share his called Topping Trees. And I know Topping Trees is kind of this Zen Buddhist collection of poems, so that was going to probably be a really cool environment that they create in this space. And then on Sunday, June 23rd, This is another one I'm really excited about. We're inviting families to join us from 2 to 4 p.m. for a super epic Dogman party. Families are encouraged to drop in anytime between 2 and 4 that day for an amazing afternoon of Dogman fun. We're going to have activities, we're going to have crafts, and of course, a meet and greet photo op with Dogman himself. So that will be very cool. And then last but not least, award-winning and New York Times bestselling mystery author Paul Dwarin, who's a longtime North Shire staff favorite, will discuss the 15th book in his Mike Bowditch series, Pitch Dark. And that will be Sunday, June 30th at 4 p.m. This whole series takes place in the Maine North Woods, and so he's coming down to join us. But
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, so much on the calendar for June. And until then, I'm Karen Simpson McVicker and wishing you all happy reading.